sound is rolling.
Okay.
But to get a sound check, tell us a joke.
I don't actually do jokes.
In that case, tell us a witty anecdote from your experience at Necon.
I went to play miniature golf and nobody else showed up, so I was there by myself.
They do say it is the loneliest sport.
I think I should get all 3 medals since I was the only one there, you know? I mean, Tiger at the British Open doesn't let a little rain stop him, you know? I don't know. What's wrong with these Necon people? Agent Kirby McCauley and publisher Don Grant said, you know, that we really need a place where horror people and fantasy people can get together. So they came up with the idea of holding a World Fantasy Convention. But I was still in school because I had spent 4 years in the Air Force, including a year in Vietnam. And when I got back, I went to college on the GI Bill. So I was older than most students. So we were the Gophers. And that's when I met Les Daniels, noted horror writer. So that during the convention, my job was to give bus tours, and Les's job also. I met a lot of people at that first convention that I had read all my life. Robert Bloch, Fritz Leiber, Manly Wade Wellman, Frank Belknap Long, a lot of the old Weird Tales writers, Joseph Payne Brennan, and got to know them all. And at the end of the convention, when Kirby was thanking everybody, he said, I particularly want to thank Bob Booth, who is very good at delegating, i.e. giving other people jobs so I don't have to do them myself. And he said, if it's ever held here in Providence again, Bob should be chairman. We put together a committee locally that included Dick Brisson, artists Bob Lavoie and Steve Gervais, Les Daniels again, and Paul Dobish. It was 1979, Halloween weekend, and we ran the 5th World Fantasy Convention. People here at Roger Williams University read the press coverage and saw the press coverage on TV. When they saw the articles about World Fantasy, they called me and said, why don't you have it here? Well, we couldn't, because World Fantasy is always in October, and there are students here in October. Out of curiosity, I asked them, well, what would the deal be? And they quoted me a price that was so silly, so ridiculously cheap for what you got, that I said, we've got to do something. So I picked up the phone and I called Charles L. Grant. Charlie and I were close friends. And I said, Charlie, we're going to start something new here. And would you like to be a first guest of honor? And Les Daniels, who was program chairman of the committee, also functioned as the first Toastmaster. And what kind of gave it its flavor is that we were all pretty tired from running World Fantasy. So we didn't devote a lot of time to structure and scheduling. We just kind of came and hung out. And lo and behold, people said, this is a neat idea. If you may come to Necon even for the first time, by the end of the weekend, you've met everybody. So our biggest function room will only hold 200, if that. So if we had more than that, we couldn't fit everybody in there, and we wouldn't have beds for them. So basically, 200 is our cap, that's it. Differences. Most conventions take place in hotels. This is a college campus. We basically have the facility to ourselves. So we can hang out, and we don't have to worry about being seen in public, and we don't have to put on a face, or we can just be ourselves. And that's how the spirit of Necon came to be born, which I would describe in 2 words. One is that we do not take ourselves seriously, either as individuals or as a group. And 2 is we are totally non-judgmental. And the thing that kind of caught on right away is the fact that the fans and the writers, even very well-known writers, saw themselves as equals and just would sit and talk. David Morrell, one of the great thriller writers of our time, was here one year, and a guy came up to me it was his first time at Necon, and he said, I've always wanted to meet David Morrell. I want to write thrillers. and I would just love to talk to him. So I said, oh, hold on, he's right over there, come on. I brought him over and introduced him. And they sat on the lawn, just the two of them, for 2 hours and talked about how you go about writing a thriller. Now, I don't know if the guy ever made anything of himself, but that's not the point. The fact that David was willing and, in fact, eager to do that, to share his craft, his thoughts, his ideas, with someone who was a total unknown newbie. You just can't do that at a regular science fiction or mystery or fantasy convention. Everybody can come to Necon no matter what race, creed, color, religion, sexual preference. Even if they don't use Max, they can come. So Necon has been well represented within the front ranks of horror literature for 32 years. So we've gone from ghosts, there was a big vampire period, and now the zombie stuff. We've also gone from quiet horror to gory horror. And at each step of the way, the leading lights came here. The one thing you got to understand about numbers is that they're almost totally irrelevant. All the writers now are doing other things than writing just horror because very few can make a living at it. Where early on, that first decade, everybody was making a living. Everybody considered themselves a professional horror writer. In the 80s, it was not uncommon for a writer with a modest reputation to get $15,000 to $25,000 advance per book. And at the time, the standard of living, that actually was a year's wage or close to it anyways. So now nobody gets that. And of course, you can't live on $25,000 to $30,000 anymore. So it costs twice as much to live and you're getting 1/10 as much. They now live off royalties. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are not good at paying. And whenever you have a wholesale change in a distribution system, the economics change for all parties. And what I try to tell writers when I'm trying to sell them on the idea of doing ebooks is you got to consider it like an annuity. So while you don't get a big chunk before you publish it, once you do publish it, you kind of get a steady income stream of whatever size. Every book we've published has sold some copies every month. I'm not saying a lot, but some. It's constant sales. And the more books that we publish, the more books we sell of our older titles. So it's like the rising tide floats all boats. And eventually, if you get enough books, that's a pretty good amount. A genre is nothing but a label. It's a way to make readers and shoppers particularly know that this book, which is about action in the Old West, is different than this book, which is about action in outer space. Each writer has its own, his or her unique style, sound, area of expertise, and the following is built on those elements. And if you look and sound like another writer, then you're just a copyist, and you're not going to go anywhere. You got to carve out your own territory, whatever that may be. Charlie Grant put it best. He said in an essay he wrote, Necon isn't a convention, it's Necon, where you sit in the dining room and talk, you sit in the bar and talk, you sit out on the wall and talk, sit under a tree and talk and talk and talk and talk, and it's wonderful.